So now in this third section, we're going to focus on why do we have a crisis of connection? Why do we see boys struggle with their friendships during late adolescence? Why do they talk about not being able to find the friendships that they want during late adolescence? And the primary culprit, according to the boys themselves, has to do with an American culture that really focuses on the individual over relationships, and they privilege the sort of self over community. And there's all sorts of evidence of this. When we look, for example, I'm a developmental psychologist, so I'm very attuned to this. When we look, for example, at our notions of maturity, our notions of maturity are based on being self-sufficient, being able to do things on your own, not needing others. And in fact, what message we give when we give young people that message that that's the definition of maturity is that we're really privileging the self over the relationships. So what boys will say is that I'm old enough, thus I don't need to share my feelings. So what boys learn is that becoming mature is actually becoming more isolated. The second way we see this focus on individualism is the way we define success and think about success and talk about success. So if we look at a person like Steve Jobs, who built Apple, the focus is almost always on Steve Jobs as an individual. When in fact you listen to Steve Jobs talk about building Apple and building that company, he's always talking about the partners he built it with. He's talking about Steve Wozniak, he's talking about all sorts of collaborators that helped him build the company, but yet somehow we still go back to the fact that Apple must be the success of an individual. And that again underscores our individual focus. What communicates to boys is this idea that it's the individual that matters. You also see this individualism in the image of the American cowboy, the icon of maturity, but also of manhood. And so we communicate to our boys with those images that, again, what's important is being able to be out on your own and not needing others and not needing relationships. The other way in which we hear that in American culture is through our norms of masculinity. And that's obviously a story that's playing out throughout these narratives. You hear it in the boys saying explicitly, I don't need close friendships, I'm not gay. You hear them talk about needing to man up. You hear them talk about needing to not be emotionally expressive. One of the boys in my studies said, it might be nice to be a girl because then I wouldn't have to be emotionless. And that statement should give everybody pause. The idea that we're raising boys to think that in order to be a man you have to be emotionless is deeply troubling, and in fact really lies at the root of why these boys are struggling so much to maintain their connections. Because what they realize, and this is the most remarkable thing to hear this from boys themselves, is that their natural emotional acuity, their natural need for relationships begins to be pathologized. It begins to be seen as weak, as something that real men don't have. When in fact what we know from all the research is real men need them, they want them, they have them in many cases, but they struggle to maintain them. So these kinds of messages that we give to our boys really needs to change. The question comes at this point when we have a better understanding of the crisis of connection, why we should care about the crisis of connection, and what's underlying the crisis of connection, what's causing this crisis of connection. We arrive at the question of what would it mean to allow our boys to be boys by encouraging and fostering their emotional acuity, their friendships, their ability to read the emotional world, the human world? What would it mean to value the very things that we stereotype as girly and gay? What would it mean if we actually understood that having emotionally intimate friendships is not just a girl thing, it's not just a gay thing, it's not just a childish thing, it's a human thing, and that humans need that.